the work he can't do. He won't give you what you need, but he won't give you up. He ain't worried about the hurting. You won't ever break his heart. He ain't worried if it's worthless, 'cause he hasn't known from your start. No, no, no. He won't give you what you need, but he won't give you up. You know, he don't love you. He won't ever be enough. You know what he can do. He won't give you what you need, but he won't give you up.
Welcome to Laura Heywood Interviews. I'm Laura Heywood, and we're listening to a few songs from Morgan James, who's my guest today. She'll be here shortly, and in the meantime, let's hear another tune.
Gave me life and you showed me the way. You set the rules and you taught me to play. Never warned me when the game had changed. Any moment you could take it all away. I tried so hard to please you. It's all I've ever done, but you won't let me. You won't let me win. No matter what I do, oh, you won't let me win. I'm so alone, baby. When
On today's show, Laura Heywood interviews
recording artist, Broadway actor, and the hardest working woman I know, Morgan James. Welcome to Laura Heywood Interviews. I'm Laura Heywood. When I sat down to write a description of my guest today, I ended up sounding like a thesaurus. Tireless, driven, persistent, resilient, enthusiastic. Basically, if there's an adjective in the realm of hardworking and determined, Morgan James is that. And there's a reason I chose those words before talented, even though that's the most obvious adjective to describe this incredible performer. Talented she is, with 5 Broadway credits, 5 solo albums, including her newest, Memphis Magnetic, from which we just heard 2 songs, and literally tens of millions of views on YouTube, just to name a few quantifiable stats. There's no questioning Morgan's ability. What impresses me the most, though, is that she never assumed that talent was enough. There's zero entitlement in this woman. Instead of taking her natural gift for granted, she's used it like a key to an endless library of learning, growing, enhancing, and redefining her own standards of success. Today, we'll talk about how her rural upbringing in Idaho led to a dream of attending Juilliard, how even with a degree from that most prestigious institution, it took her 10 years to make it to Broadway, and how her career shifted to one of a recording and touring artist, and how getting a record deal is not the automatic windfall it might seem on the surface. Plus, as is generally the case on this show, you'll get to listen in as I catch up with a dear friend who I haven't seen in far too long, and hopefully get to know us both a little better in the process. Morgan James, welcome to Laura Heywood Interviews.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so proud of you.
Oh, thank you.
You have accomplished so much in such a different way than many of the other performers that I've become friends with over my 15 years in New York City. And it's just been a joy to watch you evolve. We've known each other for, I think, about 10 years now.
We have, and actually we go back even further if you consider our mutual friends and where we grew up.
Yeah, because I mentioned Idaho, but you were only there like until you were about 10, right? And then you were in Northern California?
Yeah, I moved to Northern California when I was 12, and then did junior high and high school in California, where we didn't even discover until later that we had all these mutual friends.
Yeah, exactly.
So we were connected from the way back.
You were in Modesto. I
was
in Oakland. So we had a couple like hours, maybe an hour and a half drive between us. But was there a big water park in Modesto? I feel like there was some reason that I would go out there, or like a state fair or something.
Probably. I don't know.
But
so many festivals.
But we did, like, when I lived in San Francisco after college, I became really good friends with my manager at the Gap when I worked at the Gap briefly, Ryan, who was one of your best friends from high school.
Yeah, we knew each other. I can't remember if we went to the same high school, but we had a bunch of mutual theater friends. And so then we made that connection later when I met you for real at Sirius.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, geez. And it feels like so long ago, but also I remember that day so clearly.
Yeah, I do
Were
too.
you promoting Godspell at the time?
I think the first time I came to Sirius, I was promoting my live album.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I want to say I got there when I was signed to Epic Records, which I got signed to Epic Records when I was doing Godspell, while I was doing Godspell. And my first record on Epic was a live jazz album.
And that happened
randomly.
by accident,
It was
right?
totally by accident.
So let's just jump right in. You were doing a live concert of covers by a specific artist.
Yes, I was doing a Nina Simone show. She's one of my idols. And I was doing the show at Jazz at Lincoln Center at Dizzy's Club. And right before the show happened, I had been signed to Epic Records unexpectedly. And the president of Sony, Doug Morris, said, well, I want to come to the show. I said, of course. So he came to the show with his wife. He loved the show, and he called me into his office the next day and said, I want this to be a record while we're waiting for you to write your studio record. And I was like, oh, I asked them, and they said that we couldn't release it. And he picks up the phone, makes one phone call, and it was done. So we turned it into, it was that quick. So we recorded the 2 sets we did and, picked the best, version of that. And, it came out 3 months later.
That's incredible. Like, was that the kind of, I know you've got a love of soul music, and that obviously there was a reason that you chose Nina Simone as the subject for that Lincoln Center concert. Is that what the kind of album you were setting out to release? Was that the kind of artist you saw yourself as? Or were you thinking you were going to be, isn't Sarah Bareilles on that?
She is on
were
Epic,
you thinking that you were going to be sort of like an adult contemporary singer-songwriter type as opposed to a soul artist?
I didn't know because I didn't have any songs written at that time.
I had not written any of the songs that would become my first studio album yet. I got signed purely as a voice, which is very rare and a little problematic because no one has anything to attach themselves to in terms of material. If you're just a voice, then they send you into a bunch of writing rooms and it gets really, really complicated because everybody has an opinion on which writers they want on the record. And I was had my heart set on writing a good deal of the songs and having it have an original voice. And I knew I kind of wanted to make an R&B record, a soulful R&B record, which is ultimately what I made.
Yeah, you've made several of them.
Yes, I think they've gotten perhaps less contemporary R&B and more, traditional soul through the years.
Yeah.
But they always have that soulfulness, I think, is the through line.
Well, even when you're doing like the Beatles or Joni Mitchell, you sound like you're, recording in the Deep South and decades ago. Like you have this soulfulness in your sound that I would not necessarily attach to like a petite white woman in in 2020, which I can imagine has been tough as trying to establish an identity when you don't necessarily quote unquote look like the way your voice sounds.
Yes. Speaking to that point of soulfulness, and I always tell people on stage, I say, all the people that I admired through the years, when I was growing up listening to them, they were so different. Everything from opera to musical theater. I mean, I loved musical theater, obviously, and Joni, Aretha, the Beatles, on and on and on.
And didn't you once take a road trip with our mutual friend Ryan to see Cher?
I sure did. Sure did. Yep. I mean, my musical tastes are varied, but when I kind of grew up and started to take stock of that, I discovered that what unites all of these people is soulfulness, is their own version of soulfulness. Paul Simon and Joni Mitchell, it may seem different from Aretha, but they have their own soulfulness, their own authenticity of sound. And I loved that. I admired that so much.
Your voice, I feel like now I associate with that soulfulness. You came to New York as an opera singer.
Yeah.
And then somehow you quote unquote taught yourself to belt, which I still don't really understand. Can you, for people who are not as familiar with you as I am, can you talk us through sort of like the trajectory of your understanding of your own voice? And I'd like to start with the karaoke machine.
Oh, right. Well, it's funny because you said a minute ago that I don't look like I sound. And when I was at Juilliard, I also didn't look like what I sounded like.
I think you look like what you sound like now because I know you.
Well, now you know me.
But if you were on that show, The Voice, for example, I think that the judges would be surprised when they turned around.
Right.
That's all I meant by that.
No, yeah.
Because what does that
true.
mean to look like you sound? You know what I mean?
No, but it's valid. And I also don't look like an opera singer. I looked very different from all the opera singers. So and I didn't have the body type of an opera singer in terms of making that big of a sound to really, I had to take stock and say, do I have the body type and the stamina and the voice to make it as an opera singer? And I felt a little at odds the moment I got to Juilliard, and that I, didn't really see myself wanting to sing the same roles over and over again for the rest of my life. And so then I had always wanted to do musical theater, and so I kind of set my sights on musical theater.
Don't forget the karaoke machine.
Karaoke machine. So that was the first time anybody heard me sing. Was my grandmother got me a karaoke machine, and my grandpa carried me upstairs and made me sing for the family, and it was probably the greatest hits of Mariah Carey and or Phantom of the Opera, because those go hand in hand.
I mean, look, I could hear Sarah Brightman hitting some whistle tones. You
True,
know what I mean?
true.
They're not that different. Also, have you ever gone in for Christine?
Oh, probably 25 times.
Because why aren't you playing?
Oh
Christine?
yeah, I went in it got hilarious how many times I was not cast in Phantom. Yeah, I mean that's one of the realities and the really sad things that none of us talk about really is. Yeah, people are like, oh, have you ever been in for name a thing? And I've probably been in for it many, many times.
Yeah.
And through the years, that was my auditioning and being called back literally dozens of times for Christine was in my period before I had a Broadway show. And it was and I would just say, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, or if I'm ever going to make it, or if I'm just barking up the wrong tree and I should give up. It's devastating, that kind of rejection that we face.
I can imagine. And I can also imagine that somebody like me being like, how come you're not Christine? Is
No,
like
I knew you didn't.
infuriating.
I knew you didn't mean it that
Like,
way.
you know what you should do? You should consider being the lead in Phantom of the Opera.
You should be on a TV show. Have you ever thought about it? It's good money. And I'll just look at people and I'll be like, yes, I have thought of it. I would
Thanks
love
for
that.
the tip.
Thank you.
No, I just mean like that for a coloratura voice who loves Broadway, especially one who specifically loves Andrew Lloyd Webber, it seems like that would be, they would want you, is what I mean. Not like, have you ever thought about
You'd be
doing
surprised, Laura.
So you, and wasn't it, so Audra McDonald, the legend Audra, was
Yes.
from the same area of
Yeah, she's from
California as
Fresno.
you. Yeah, and there are actually like a remarkable number of Broadway stars who have come out of Fresno.
Really? I
and,
didn't know that.
Like Heidi Blickenstaff is from there. In fact, I feel like
Oh, I feel like she's from Stockton, or is she from Fresno?
I
I think we
know
had this
that
conversation.
I feel like they competed for the role of Annie when they were little girls.
Oh my gosh,
It was something like
that's
that.
hilarious.
And then I also just know, like, I have a really good friend who is a graphic designer who actually now does the graphic design for Lin-Manuel Miranda's merchandise line, T. Rico.
Oh, wow.
And he's from Fresno, and they have like really, really good regional theater productions. And
They
he's-
do.
He's done a lot of their like projection design and posters and stuff, and so I think it's a breeding ground that people don't necessarily expect. But I know that you were like, I love Audra. Audra went to Juilliard.
I want to go to
I
Juilliard.
must go to
Therefore,
Juilliard.
1 + 1 = 2. Yeah, totally.
Did you know anything about Juilliard?
Oh,
other than
yeah,
that
of course.
Well, I mean, I didn't.
Oh, yeah.
When
No,
I
I
was
was a
growing up,
total-
and it was the same time as you. Like, I think I it was like I'd heard of the Old Globe, but it wasn't that I knew anything about it, and I think Juilliard was sort of the same thing. Like, I think that I thought it was related to like the New York Symphony.
I was like a rare breed of geeky type A obsessive that, I was starting to plan where I wanted to go to college long before it was ever time to apply. I was very, very focused and knew what I wanted. And
Would
even
you
before,
describe yourself as tireless, driven, persistent, resilient, enthusiastic?
I sure would.
hardworking,
I
and
sure would.
determined?
They call me Squeaky Wheel James. Like, oh yeah, I don't like I.
Why
don't,
isn't that your recording artist name?
I know, right? I know. Well, I need like a jazz name. You know how it's like, oh, there's old Willie
Yeah.
Blind Shoe Morris, and I want to be like Morgan Squeaky Wheel James.
Yeah,
she's
you
at it
should
again.
be.
No, I'm really that. So my parents were both, in the arts, so I knew every program, at least at that time, that was reputable.
It's not like you could just Google it though. Like, how did
couldn't.
you?
Well, it's very famous.
I mean,
I
know,
sent
but-
away for all the brochures to all the. I sent away for.
Oh.
You go on. No, there weren't web. We could go on their website. Wait, what year was that?
No,
Well, I sent them a pigeon carrier.
I'm a couple years older than you, but we're about the same age. I
Yeah.
don't think that. I mean, it depends how early you were doing it, because I first got Prodigy, which was like a precursor to AOL, when I was 14. So that would have been 93.
Yeah.
And that was there were websites, but it's not like
I think I sent away for all the brochures to all
Yeah.
the schools.
You probably just like looked up their address in the
Yeah, I did.
white pages.
Oh
or
yeah,
something.
and it was. I knew famous people went there. That'll get me to New York. I need to go there. And so I just set my sights on it. And I applied to all the other great schools in California as well. But I was very, very obsessed with getting to where I went. And even before I wanted to do music, I was obsessed with becoming a veterinarian. So I was like fully on the path. I'm going to go to UC Davis. I'm going to work at San Diego Zoo. I'm going to open my own practice. Like, I was obsessed with that. So I've always been very driven to be something or want to be something.
So no matter what it was, you had that same determination. It wasn't.
Yes.
It wasn't always, like become what you are now.
Yeah.
It was that. This is one of my favorite concepts, and it's funny. I'm like talking too far ahead of the project, but I'm theoretically working on a book that I call The Infinite Hallway. And when I say theoretically, I mean I think about it all the time, and very few words have actually made it
I
to
do the same.
paper.
I'm also theoretically writing a book.
But I feel like the more I talk about the fact that I'm writing a book, the more likely it is to somehow get written.
Totally.
But the idea is, the image that's in my head that I feel like you epitomize is that if you're at one end of a hallway and all the way super far down, so far you almost can't see it, there's a door. And let's say for you it says veterinarian on it. You have to start running towards that door, or you have to at least be walking towards it. You'll never get there if you don't make the progress. And that door sort of pulls you like a magnet, like that's the carrot, the motivation. But then as you go down the hallway, you end up passing all of these other doors. And sometimes people see those doors as distractions, but for me, they're opportunities. And you can, like, as you're running by, you peek down and you're like, oh, there's something interesting down that hallway, and there's something different down this other hallway. And eventually something's going to have a bigger pull, and you're going to be like, oh, I'm going to just take a hard left turn and go into, opera training, even though my initial momentum was drawn from being a vet. If I hadn't been doing the work to get there, I never would have passed the door that showed me the opera opportunity. And now the door at the end of that hallway is pulling me.
Yeah.
And some people think you have to go from point A to point B without changing direction, or they think that you need to know right away where you want to end up, or you can't have the momentum. But I just don't believe that the path from A to B is a straight line.
Oh, it's nonlinear development for sure.
Like, I wanted to be on Broadway, and guess what? I took all the hard left turns, and here I am.
Yeah.
And I'm not on Broadway in the traditional sense that I thought I wanted to be, but I'll be on stage hosting a talk back at Come From Away. And then I was on stage at Waitress hosting cast album karaoke. And, Lin-Manuel Miranda calls and goes, you're the one I want to host the 10-year anniversary reunion of In the Heights. And, it's like, well, I ended up through all of these left turns feeling that momentum because I was driven, and whatever it was, I don't even know that it was driven in my case, except that I got obsessed with stuff and I couldn't help but run towards whatever I was obsessed with.
Yeah.
But I see that same thing in you. It's like, just don't make me sit still and wait for something to come to me.
Oh, no, definitely. And Bridget Everett, whom I love so much, an amazing comedian, she says on stage this quote that you heard of from LL Cool J, which is, dreams don't have deadlines. And it's a big part of her show. She says it all the time, and I think about it a lot. Mm-hmm. And there are so many things that have come onto my table and onto my bountiful table and a table or my plate in front of me that I at times felt really empty, and then other times felt bountiful. And things that came to my table that I didn't think would ever come back around. Mm-hmm. And you just never know. They don't have deadlines. It's nonlinear development, You take a left, it doesn't mean that other hallway is closed forever.
That's right. And sometimes there are circles,
Absolutely. And sometimes the hallways are connected. And
yeah, doors do not slam shut just because they're behind you.
Yeah.
So does this mean that someday you're going to be a vet?
No,
it
does not. I could not. The thing that made the impetus for the left turn was that I have no skills in math and science. It's not because music I was just better at, Yeah. No, it means that there are things in the classical realm that I never thought were possible that I think are possible now. And things I gave up on that actually I think might happen. And, nothing has happened in my career when I thought it would happen. Nothing. I thought I would go to Juilliard and just roll out of bed and get a Broadway show, and I was totally naive.
And then what did you think would happen after that? You just work on Broadway for the rest of your life?
Oh, yeah. I thought I would just work on Broadway and get a Tony Award and forever and ever, amen. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think it would be easy. I just think that I thought that was my destiny. Mm-hmm. And that, if you work hard, and you're talented, you'll get what you want. Mm-hmm. And that's perhaps the first and best lesson you can learn about New York City and about this business, mm-hmm. is that having talent isn't enough, working hard isn't enough, being in the right place at the right time isn't even enough. There is no one way.
And you know what definitely isn't enough? Quote unquote, wanting it so bad.
Yeah, definitely not enough.
I hear so many people who are like, but I want it so bad. And I think that's lovely, and it's a great place to start. In fact, it's you have to want it so
Yeah.
bad, but then it's like, okay, well, what are you doing?
Well, that's the other thing is I see a lot of people who are not taking steps, like you said, in toward the door, and they want it so bad, but they're not. Their actions say otherwise. I think what was so frustrating to me and what it was so hard for me to reconcile, and I spent so many nights, and I'm telling you, so many nights crying about this, is that I was ostensibly taking every step possible. I've always been this way, that the no stone unturned, the constantly working, constantly striving. And I felt like I wasn't making any headway. Now, what I wanted to say to younger people is that I just couldn't see any of the headway.
Right.
Now I look back and seeds that I planted 20 years ago are coming up. They don't have deadlines. And so it's a huge leap of faith to try to be in this business because you have to just go out and be like, oh, hopefully there'll be a garden of vegetables someday. Don't know when.
I believe there's a line from Hamilton that says, what is a legacy? A legacy is planting a garden that you'll never get to see. And we luckily do get to see it, but you got to trust,
Yeah.
I think about
it's
this
so
all
hard.
the time too. And then the other thing that for me has been really important, because I feel like these lessons that I preach about growth and hard work and, and for me, the biggest, easiest piece of advice I can give anybody who wants to make it in anything is to read the book Mindset by Carol Dweck, which is all about prioritizing progress over results. And if you're like, all I want to do is just get better at this, then you can't fail as long as you're willing to do the work to get better. And it changed my entire perspective on what success looked like. Anyway, I didn't really get that till my mid-30s, and I wish that I had gotten it at, I don't know, my early 30s.
But you couldn't have because you
maybe.
can't rush those. I'm a big believer that you can't rush the lessons, that there is no way I could have arrived at the person I am now faster because there was only one path for me and it's completely unique.
Right.
And I think that the book you're speaking about, it sounds like it would be a little unpopular for the generations below us to a certain extent because a lot of them have seen people get their 15 minutes quickly and easily.
That's right.
And that going for fame or notoriety or a gimmick is very, very popular and very rewarded. And so trying to tell a younger person, just work on your progress, do these steps, read these books, listen to these albums, that they want an easy solution. They want an answer.
Right. And I think that anybody who, like I think you and I both was told from an early age that they're a natural, that they have a gift, that what they do is effortless. It's really easy. Like you said, like music, singing came easily to you, so you focused in on that. And there was a little part of me that cringed when you were like, I don't have any talent in math and science. And I wanted to be like, but if you worked on it, like you didn't necessarily start with the ingrained talent. But for me, I know is something that, and then look, I'm not suggesting that you quit music to go become a vet or to study science and math, but I do think that there's a part of a lot of gifted kids that feels like because there are certain things that I'm just good at, I'm just going to avoid the things that don't come so easily.
Right.
And I constantly, I preach this like a broken record, that there's a difference between being new at something and being bad at it. And I wish that I had known that as a kid and gone in being like, instead of going, well, I can't go to basketball camp because I don't know I'm bad at basketball. Well, guess what? Going to basketball camp is how you get better at it. Nobody's
Yeah.
suggesting you play for the varsity team, but like
Right.
you also can show up and be a beginner and take pride in, oh, what's the method? How do I train myself? But I think that where I was going with the idea of these seeds that you planted 20 years ago is that sometimes it's not the seed you think you planted.
Oh, absolutely.
And, if you're, let's take you auditioning for Christine 20 times, for example. I think that the standard sort of automatic assumption would be that the seed you're planting is that eventually you're going to get to play Christine, and that you're just going to keep going in, and they're going to hear you, and eventually they're going to see you, and that's the goal. But really, what that may have taught you was resilience, and that it was the muscle you developed of getting back up, and that it wasn't about Christine or that role at all, and you might have felt like you were on a treadmill, not making any progress, but what happens when you're on a treadmill is that your muscles get stronger. and
Oh,
you can
yeah.
stay on it for longer. And maybe that's what when people think that they're quote unquote doing the work and not making any progress, they're getting stronger so that they can, stay on that path longer the next time, and then the next role will come to them, or maybe it's something unrelated to the work.
It's a war of attrition. I always say that it's not necessarily the best people that last. It's the people that last, the
Yeah.
people that stick it out.
That's right.
I am like, I'm turning into a New York City rat. Like, I'm just not going anywhere. Like, I'm still here. You can't get rid of me. Oh, Morgan's still around. Yeah, let's give her a job. I'm just not giving up. And I haven't. And I totally get why someone would leave this business and leave this city. I totally get it. I am a lifer myself, and I'm just, too stubborn to leave, I suppose. But I totally get how this place and this business breaks people's spirits, and they get just too tired of the race. But those who stick it out usually kind of get over a hump where, it's just you and me left,
Yeah.
in your type.
It's funny because we were just both talking about how we're theoretically writing books.
Yeah.
And one thing that I've been telling myself lately is that, if you have a brilliant book in your head versus a mediocre book on paper, only one of those is publishable. And that the person who writes their thoughts down is infinitely more likely to get a book deal or to get their book published
Yes.
than somebody who has the best, great American Pulitzer Prize winning novel that never makes it to the page.
I say this all the time about content. People always say, well, I don't know how to start a YouTube channel or get content made. And nowadays, in 1990, you spent $1 million on, the label spent $1 million on a video, and there was one video, and every single person in the world watched it because there was no other outlet to watch anything, and it stuck around for weeks. Now, there is a new video every 5 seconds. You just put content out. It doesn't have to be the best content every single time, but it has to be just make unique, special content for you.
Yeah.
And find an audience over and over and over and over and put it out. Put it on paper. Put it out on the internet.
People ask me, how do I get followers for my YouTube channel? And I'm like, well, what's on your YouTube channel? And they're like, well, I haven't made anything yet. And it's like,
that would be a good start.
Well, I think that the greatest gift in the world is an echo chamber, because then without anybody watching or judging you, you can practice, and then you get better. The reason that I became a solid working radio host, which I was for 15 years, and I'm not even counting this thing that I do for fun right now, but I was the youngest full-time radio host in San Francisco when I was 23 and 24, and I was doing classic rock radio, songs that came out before I was born. But I got good because I had a college radio station that had literally 0 listeners.
Yes.
And I would go in, and this was in the 90s when, believe it or not, we didn't even have automation, which meant that if there was no DJ in the booth, the station would turn off and go to static. And so I would just go in and camp out on the couch in the tiny little radio station lobby. And anytime somebody didn't show up for their shift, I would go in and I would play. And if anybody had been listening, I probably would have been fired because I didn't know what I was doing. I was a beginner.
You were practicing. You were practicing.
It turned out to be practice. I thought what I was doing was playing. Whereas when
That's the best kind of practice.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas when I tried to learn how to play the violin when I was in elementary school, I shouldn't even say I tried. I was assigned the violin and I hated it, and I was forced to practice, and I avoided it at all costs because it didn't feel like play to me. I wasn't passionate about it. But anyway, the point is, I wish I had a YouTube channel that had 0 subscribers, because I could be more, and that's not actually true, because I could always start one, but I think there's such a gift in having a vacuum in which to throw something at the wall and see if it sticks. And if it sticks, that's where your followers come from. But don't try to get an audience before you know what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can't go for, this is the problem with so much of what people deem as success nowadays, is that they're not going for process at all, or progress. They're going for, this many followers equals I'm a success, no matter what backs it up.
Yeah.
And it's, people always say when I post my lessons or talk about my voice lessons, and they're like, well, why do you still go to voice lessons? Well, because first of all, you don't stop learning when you leave schools. Second of all, I have a living instrument in my throat that I use a lot, and I need to constantly keep it in shape. And also, I need to practice. If I ever do want to make some of these classical goals happen, or some of my other musical goals happen, how can I do it if I ever let my voice go out of shape? It's a constant. You have to keep practicing and keep your brain and your instrument active.
I think there's part of it that is kind of like, there's definitely a part of it that's like going to the gym, right? You can't become really strong and then never lift weights and, expect to stay strong. I think there's also a part of it that, that again brings me back to this idea of growth mindset, which is that, and I absolutely grew up feeling like this, that learning is for dumb people, and that if you're smart enough, you're just supposed to know the stuff. And I never would have phrased it in such a crude way, except that now looking at it from the other side, where I realize that's so absolutely wrong. I mean, you look at the most successful people in the world, whether it's like LeBron James, guess what? He has tons of coaches. You know who else works with a coach? Bill Gates. People who have the raw talent are the ones that...
And you look at the smartest people, they read a book a day.
Yeah,
they
that's
read.
right.
And the best musicians, and I say this all the time to younger people, they listen to everything. You can tell if someone actually listens to music. When I listen to a singer, I know what they've listened to and not listened to. I can tell if you have depth of knowledge, because that's the kind of, we have to do this kind of research. And you can tell when you're talking with someone whether they're well read. You can tell. And so if you want to be, you have to remain curious. You have to remain interested.
Yes.
In order to grow in any field.
That's so crucial, the idea of curiosity, because I think that there are people who will be like, all right, I'm supposed to freaking read a book a day. So here's my book. And they'll slog through it. And then they'll be like, I read a freaking book a day and I still don't have the job, or I memorized a monologue every day and I still am not getting work. And it's like, but did you have joy in it? Did you enjoy?
Curiosity.
Interest. Curiosity is the key, because if nothing else, you're entertaining yourself. And if you're satisfied with the way that you're spending time, and satisfaction comes in a lot of different ways. There's satisfaction of scrolling through Instagram and getting the dopamine rush every time somebody likes you. But that's not what I'm talking about. That's like the quote unquote junk food of satisfaction. But I like to say, you're not going to lift 100 pounds the first time you walk into the gym. But if you walk in there and you lift 5 pounds enough times, eventually you're going to lift 10, and that's going to feel amazing.
Yeah.
And you're still not lifting 100 pounds. But if that's what you're comparing yourself to, is somebody who's either
already lifting 100 pounds.
Yeah.
That's why you can't compare.
Right, exactly. So it is that, I like to say also, I have all these Laura Heywood aphorisms that you have to take what is in your control and use it to combat what is out of your control. And what you can control is following the things that make your heart go pitter patter. And like you said, planting seeds and finding joy in the planting, even if you don't know the color of the flower that's going to pop up.
So true.
Okay. Record label. Record deal, the ultimate goal, right?
Yes.
The ultimate, this is what, it's sort of like, getting a Broadway show, winning the Tony Award, and happily ever after. I'm going to get a record deal. I'm going to be happy forever. It's
going to solve everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely thought it was going to be the magic bullet. I am really, really glad that I discovered that it's not. And there are several friends of mine or peripheral friends of mine who are still under the assumption that it is a magic bullet, that their life will change if it happens. And I'm really glad that I experienced it firsthand to know that it's not, that nothing is. And I got a few Broadway shows back to back and a record deal all within a few years of one another. And so I discovered that none of that is a magic bullet, and none of it is as shiny or perfect as I thought it was going to be. It's all full of human beings running these places, and flawed human beings running, the business. And so it was disillusioning at first, of course, and it was disappointing, and I was really shocked and had to kind of figure out how to survive in the record label world. But now, of course, after 5 years, I was ultimately dropped from Epic Records, shock to no one. I got 2 records out of it, which was amazing. And I learned how to make an album. I learned how to really, really work in that man's world even better than I had before, and how to leverage things that I had and skills that I had to get what I wanted. Because it was like, I used to call it Game of Thrones when I would go to that building. It was insanely high pressure and intimidating. And a lot of times, most of those meetings I went to alone. And so I learned a lot. And I took that with me into the next phase, you know?
Which is what, starting your own record
label? Yeah. And, you know, just being an independent artist. Particularly this last record, I raised all the money myself. I hired everybody. I planned everything. Of course, I had lots of help, but I designed all the merch. I ordered everything. I wrote every check myself. And I rely on the kindness of strangers and fans and friends and donors alike. But I've gotten so much more comfortable asking for help and delegating and being incredibly vocal about my gratitude for those who help me make my projects possible.
You know what surprised me very recently? I realize now that it was a major blind spot for me, and this sort of Pollyanna viewpoint on the world. But you and I actually ran into each other on the street a few months ago, and you were like, I have this new album coming out, and you were like, but because I made it myself, I don't have the money to get it on the radio. And I was like, well, that's against the law. You can't, like, it's literally against the law to pay a radio station to play your music. So, like, that's not a thing. And you were like, oh, honey. Like, I felt like you were verbally patting me on the head.
I was like we'll talk about it later.
Well, because I thought, growing up in the radio world, I knew that payola was against the law.
It was for a while. It was for a while.
That back in the early days of radio, somebody would slip $100 to the DJ who would then play the record. And then that became against the law. And then somehow now it's not like people are tossing the money to the DJ because DJs don't choose their own music anymore.
That's precisely it, though. There's a DJ there's a DJ that likes my music. I don't want to incriminate anybody. And, there are a few people that like my music, and I don't even think they would be allowed to play it because they don't get to choose what they get to play.
But somebody chooses.
Yes, and it's called radio promo, by the way. So the money that you have to put toward your song, or the label has to put toward your song, or I could put it toward my song if I wanted to spend money on radio promo, but it's called radio promo.
But so let's say you decide let's say you raise $1 million and you're going to put it towards radio promo. What does that get you, and whose pocket does that money go into?
I don't know the real nitty gritty of who's getting the money. But that's why having a label, that is one of the ways in which it is a huge asset. And that's the only thing I miss about being on a label is the checkbook.
Yeah, I bet.
And the access and the contacts and the accessibility. I don't have any of that.
Yeah, you don't have the experience where the president of Sony makes one phone call and is like, "This record is happening."
Yeah, and I can't buy the most expensive publicist, and I can't get. It costs a lot of money now there are streaming agents, and now there are licensing agents, and you have to pay somebody to get your music everywhere, and it includes streaming. And so you have to have somebody trying to help you get your songs in TV and movies, and you have to have. So they've found a way to monetize every aspect of the music business, except for paying artists, of course. And it's, I don't know. It's a whole other conversation. But all that to say, there are huge downsides to being an independent artist, of course. However, the creative freedom and the authenticity, the pride in my own authenticity that I feel, I think is invaluable. And I wouldn't trade that, actually, because I've grown so much. I don't think I could have grown this much if somebody else was tying my hands and telling me what to do. I know I wouldn't have been happy because that was something that made me unhappy at the label.
You know what is really interesting about this conversation and how it relates to this particular show and platform is that if you were not an independent artist, I wouldn't have actually been able to play your songs at the start of the show.
It's true.
Because this is behind the curtain sort of like minutia about the business, but a platform like DNR Studios has to pay an exorbitant amount of money to have the right to play music. And the reason, at least ostensibly, the reason is so that the artist gets paid every time the song gets played publicly.
Well, the art, but the thing is important to remember. For instance, Epic Records owns the masters to my first 2 records.
So
Okay.
I couldn't have played those without their permission.
Definitely not. But also, if anybody wanted to use, let's say, Call My Name or Say the Words or Hunter off my first studio album, they don't even go try because it takes too long to clear it. But even if they did, the money would go to who owns my masters because I still haven't, quote unquote, recouped.
Oh, man.
So you don't get paid until you recoup, which they make it almost impossible to recoup.
Right.
They see short of it.
Right. And so when I played 2 songs of yours at the top of the show, and that was Give You Up and You Won't Let Me. And in both cases, you will not get paid for those plays, but because I had your permission to share the music, you might sell a bunch of albums, and that
From
money,
someone hearing it. Yeah.
and that money will go to you in a much more direct way.
Well, I always say to people always say, well, do any of these platforms, do any of them pay you? And I said, listen, I want people to listen wherever they like to listen, because I think people listening to music is better than people not listening to music. So I hope that it will inspire someone. If someone listens for free on a streaming platform to me, I hope it'll inspire them to come to a show or buy a CD or buy a shirt. And I want to encourage people to listen. I'm not one of these out here like, you better use this platform because that pays me the most. I really want to encourage people to just find music they love and to keep supporting artists.
Is there a platform that pays you the most? Like, if I'm going to listen to your album no matter what, is there a way that I can do that to maximum benefit for you?
I think streaming-wise, Tidal pays the most. It's all pretty negligible, but I think Tidal pays the most.
And then
and
obviously
iTunes,
is
maybe.
buying the CD a more
Buying merch
way?
at someone's show is the best way to support an artist. But buying merch from an artist or buying it off their website or is a great way to support an artist.
I should also say that you have a bunch of tour dates coming up.
I do.
You're going to be in Boston. You're going to be in some place I've never heard of called Pawling,
It's
New
only
York.
40 miles away.
Yeah, I don't leave the island of Manhattan generally, so I've
Oh,
never
well,
heard of
it's
anything.
very close. It's right upstate, 40 minutes.
Oh, amazing. Train?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, I'll look into that. Philadelphia, you're going to be in Fairfield, Connecticut, Columbia, Maryland. This is all before the end of February.
Columbia, Maryland's right by D.C., right by Baltimore.
And then Tokyo
Yes.
and Hawaii.
And
maybe,
then Napa.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You got to tell
and
your
like,
Napa folks to come out.
Of all of the, I was like, Tokyo's exciting. Oh, Hawaii. And then I was like, oh my gosh, Napa.
I love
Like, if I could
Napa.
go to any of those places to see, it would probably be Napa. Also, Napa has such a, it's known for its wines and like its spas and stuff. And like it's near Saratoga and Sonoma and like these beautiful places. But to me, like I think of Napa and I think of the music. I used to travel to Napa to go to music festivals all the time.
Totally.
And like the idea of, in fact, that like New York has this place called City Winery, and I think Boston has. Aren't you playing?
I'm
at
playing City Winery
in
at
Boston?
Philly, Boston. I play the New York one. I play Atlanta. They have them all over the country.
But the first time I ever saw music at a winery was in Napa. And it was like this stage that had, I feel like it had grapevines, like, around the proscenium. And I think I saw Counting Crows there.
So fun.
Like back in the, mid late
Early aughts.
90s.
Oh, late 90s, yeah.
Like high school days, because I'm an old lady. And I can say that because I was born in a decade previous to you. Not a decade before you, but I was born at the very end of 79. So I'm always like, you guys, I was born in the 70s. And like my millennial quote unquote colleagues are like, what? They like can't even conceive of the 70s, like
Right.
total dark ages. Anyway, so going to see you live and supporting you, and like if you can't afford a T-shirt, like tweet to your friends,
Absolutely.
share the music. There is, for
I'm
me,
a grassroots artist. I need one set of ears at a time.
yeah, I feel the same way about this live radio show / podcast. There's a handful of devoted listeners who pay $6.95 a month to be able to hear the show live and get it a week early. And then I give it away for free. And I know that drastically reduces the number of people who are going to pay the $6.95 to hear it a week early. But I also know that I want people to hear what I do. And
Yeah.
and the aside from the monthly subscription through dnrstudios.com/Laura, the number one thing that people can do to support me is to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And I even have a link called rate I think it's, oh my gosh, now I don't
I
wanna plug
need
it
that
wrong,
too. I
but
mean, it's
yeah.
I need
like,
that on iTunes and streaming and everything. You know, it's sharing with your friends, leaving a review for an album. You can't imagine how much this moves the needle for an independent
anybody.
entity.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say that, you know what would be amazing is if like once a week you picked 5 artists you love and just go leave them reviews, or pick one artist a week and be like, who are you going to give a 5-star review to today? Whether it's an artist on their Amazon page, whether it's a podcast, which by the way, that link I was looking for is ratethispodcast.com/Laura, or whether it's on a streaming service like Spotify or Apple Music or Amazon or Tidal. Like if you just were to, it would probably take, I don't know, 3 minutes to go to all of the platforms and just hit 5 stars on all of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's so many ways that don't involve money that you can support people, and I'm obsessed with that. It's easy to say I don't have any money right now, or money's
But it's
too
also,
tight.
everything I ever do is up on my channel, and it's free. You can listen and watch, and
When you say your channel, you mean YouTube?
my YouTube channel. You can subscribe. It's free to subscribe. It's free to like all my social media, and I engage personally. I handle all my social media, every single platform, and I engage personally with every single person I possibly can, because I really want to have that connection to the people that are actually listening to what I do.
That brings me to to where people can find you, which is, do you know that for we were engaged on social media long before we knew each other in person, back when my identity was anonymous, and I literally thought your name was Morgana.
Yeah, a lot of people think that. Well, somebody named Morgan James, a publishing company, has Morgan James everything. So my middle initial is A. So it's on Twitter and Instagram. I'm Morgan A. James.
Or Morgana James.
Morgana James.
And also
sounds very romantic.
The guy who runs the York Theater Company's name is James Morgan, and
I get calls for him all the time.
And his social media is backwards. I think it's like Morgan_James or something like that. And I was like, that's an actor, right? Because I worked with him on some social media stuff years ago. Anyway, so I just remember that it's at Morgana James.
Yes, it is. My Facebook is Morgan James Online, and that's also my website.
And YouTube is
Morgan James Online.
And I'm going to just subscribe to you right now. You have 180,000 subscribers. Only
when I get to 200,000 subscribers, some big things happen for me at
what
the
happens?
YouTube. So I get to record for free at the YouTube space.
I thought that was at 10,000.
It is, but you get more and more perks the higher you go.
Really?
So at 100,000, I got 2 days a month, and if I get to 200,000, I believe I get 3 days a month for free. So yeah, subscribe. It's free.
I just did. And I'm
Awesome.
going to go through and give you a thumbs up on all your videos.
Oh, you're so sweet.
While you're there, subscribe to the Broadway Girl NYC page, because I don't have any million view videos, but every view puts a fraction of a penny in my pocket.
You got
and
it.
every once in a while, I get a little check, and it all helps me keep doing what I'm
It
doing.
all helps.
So just figure out the ways to support the artists that you love, even if it's not financially. Believe it or not, we're at the end of our time.
It's been so nice chatting with you.
I've missed you.
I know, I've missed you too.
My favorite thing about this show is that people who I see and I'm like, we need to catch up. And we're like, yeah, let's do it. When are you free? Oh, maybe in 3 months I could do it. And then that day comes along and it's like, oh, sorry, something came up. But can we reschedule? But when it's it's live radio, it has to be a Monday or a Wednesday at noon. And once we're locked in, because if you don't show, I don't have a show to do. And then we just sit and chat because I own this, because I'm not on a major platform. I partnered with DNR, who have been you get to keep and own your content forever, make what you love, and we will support you.
Incredible.
And you're doing the same thing with your music. And I could not be more proud of you.
Thank you
I cannot
so
be more.
much.
I have half an hour set aside to do post-show whatever needs doing, and I'm going to spend it finding all the places that I can leave you 5 stars and subscriptions and likes. And
thank you.
I feel like what better way to spend my energy?
So my new album's Memphis Magnetic, if you want to go listen.
And go see Morgan live.
Yes.